Mr. Reese, what's your top 50 favorite artworks?
We're about to see number one.
Oh, what's number 6?
That one's like, that one's not fun.
All right, and I think I covered that in the first day of class. No, I think I covered my favorite artworks in the first day of class. Yes, I'm quite positive I did. In fact, I think I have proof.
I'm not going to lie, Mr. Reese. If you didn't write it in green text, I didn't remember it.
So that green text is helpful, right?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure the first time we took notes, I heard you say green text is what you write it down, and then I changed the trajectory of this class and be
Well, the all the other stuff is still on the test. It's just not specifically those words. All right, yeah, favorite eras of art history. Like I went over it. All right, well, hang on. All right, so all right. There's me talking about Rococo and neoclassicism. All right, favorite paintings right here. I went over it. All right, that shows me that you did not pay attention on the first day of class.
Yeah, I You're too busy asking the teacher what the favorite color was. Yeah, every teacher what their favorite color was. Purely because they can kind of stop asking all the people what their favorite color was. You said it right in full class. You just did. Bro, you should give him a fair go. I've never asked the color. Some way to describe her, I don't think a single person was good. Dang. You just got described her as like the worst person in the school. The fact that Miss Wilson described her, like, oh yeah, she's not better than me. It's like, yeah, I'm better.
Who was she describing when she said that?
Miss Watson.
Who was describing Miss Watson when she said that?
Miss Wilson.
Okay.
Psychology,
All right.
Oh my god. Doing this psych teacher.
Mr. Reese, do you have opinions on Miss Watson?
Yes, I have lots of opinions.
Can you tell us?
Who is Miss Watson?
Oh.
English 1301, 1302.
Oh, no, I don't know
I asked specifically if you had opinions on Miss Watson.
her. Yeah, I can tell you opinions. They may not be correct.
All right.
What do you think? What's your opinion?
Okay, we finished up with the charging Chaucer. So we are going to get into the Raft of Medusa. In order to properly explain the Raft of Medusa, I need to go over a little bit of history with you. All right, so let's pay attention. Eyes up on the screen. In the time, in the 18th century, the predominant art style in France was the Rococo, and the predominant ruling class was the aristocracy. We've been over this, so you should have a good understanding of this group of people and this style. All right, and their behavior led to the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror, and then the installation of the French Republic. All right. It was a horrible time. And by the way, who was the reign of terror aimed at? Who was against the revolution? It was the aristocracy. All right. It was aimed at the aristocracy. Aristocracy was being arrested and executed. So, what do you do if you're the aristocracy during that time? You get the hell out of Dodge. All right. So, there was a mass exodus from France of the aristocrats. Then we had the Napoleonic Wars, and Napoleon ushered in the empire, and what a total success that was, right? That turned out to be an absolute a debacle, all right? And Napoleon is left on the island by himself to rot and die. And what the Napoleonic Wars did is they really messed up all of Europe because Napoleon was trying to take over Europe, and there was lots of warfare, and all the boundaries had changed because he was trying to expand the French Empire. All right, so a brief look back at the types of governments in France. First, we had the monarchy, all right, and that all up until 1789, that was working well for the French aristocrats, not so good for the people. So then we have the revolution that topples the monarchy. We set up the republic. Napoleon establishes an empire that doesn't go so well. So what they do is they usher in the monarchy again. So it is Henry the 18th, King Henry the 18th, and he is put again into the monarchy is once again put into charge of France. So what that means is all of the aristocrats that had fled France are now coming back to France. Now, when you get rid of the old government and put in a new government, you have lots of high positions in the government that you need people to fill. So what we have down here in this illustration, this group of people right here is the competent, qualified candidates trying to get a job. But the king has different ideas. The king wants to put his friends in the high-level government positions. And these are incompetent, unqualified friends of the king and aristocrats that are getting these high-level employee jobs. You know what this is called? It's called nepotism. All right, you should know that term. If you are applying for a job and you are the most qualified candidate for that job, somebody else gets the job because they know the person that's hiring, that's nepotism. All right, it still happens. All right. Okay, so all of Europe is messed up from the Napoleonic Wars, and they get together in the Congress of Vienna in 1814 and discuss what are we going to do. And basically they'd say, let's just go back to the way things were before Napoleon took power. And that's what they agreed on. The reason I'm telling you this is because of this little place right here, St. Louis, right up here, or Saint Louis. All right. During the Napoleonic Wars, let me back up. Before the Napoleonic Wars, it was a French settlement. During the Napoleonic Wars, the British took over. And now that the Napoleonic Wars are over and everything's going back to the way things were before the Napoleonic Wars, this settlement, Saint Louis, is returning to French rule. Got it? All right. Now, here's where the Medusa comes in. So we have a boat and 3 others. They are in a convoy. All right. And these 4 ships are going from France to Saint Louis. Their mission is to transport people and supplies from France to Saint Louis. They have to, because all the British are getting forced out of Saint Louis, there's going to be a lot of empty spaces. So they have to put in soldiers there to keep it safe. They have to get in bakers and teachers and government officials and and storekeepers and everything to make that colony thrive. So in that convoy of ships, one of them is called the Medusa. And yes, it's named after the lady with snakes in her hair that turns you into stone if you look at her. But that's as far as mythologically we're going to go in this story. The Medusa is the finest ship in the French Navy, and it is leading this convoy to Saint Louis. On board the Medusa is this guy. He's the captain. He is incompetent. He hasn't been on a boat in 25 years. He has never been in command of a ship. He was appointed captain because he was politically connected. This is the nepotism. And he was not appointed because of his skills as a captain. And he's been living in England for about the last 25 years. All right. And he is also a drunk and he is disagreeable. Great guy. So on the ship, the Medusa, there are 400 people. There's the captain and the crew. That is 160 sailors that are in charge of sailing the ship. And then there are 166 soldiers that are going to go to Saint Louis and garrison the place. And then here's all the people that are going to live there. And like I said, it's the governor and his family, it's the bakers, engineers, teachers, doctors, apothecaries, writers, and everybody else that's needed to set up this colony. This is their intended route. This is before electronic navigation, so they have to sail, east, west, north, south. So if you sail west a certain number of miles, and then you turn south and you sail a certain number of miles, and then you turn east a certain number of miles, you'll get to your destination. That is the course. On the way there, in fact, quite soon at the beginning, the governor and his wife, these are upper class idiots. These are aristocrats, just like the captain. They tell the captain, hey, we don't like being on this boat. Can you make it go faster? And the captain says, yeah, sure, I'll make it go faster. So here's what I imagine that the conversation between the captain and his crew went like. It says, the captain says, officers, make the ship go faster. The governor wants to arrive early. And the officers say, we can't do that. And he says, of course we can. It's like, sir, we have to stay with the convoy. Who's in charge, you or me? And then he mutters under his breath, idiot. And he says, what did you say? So long story short, this trip was full of the captain doing things that he wasn't supposed to do. Dangerous things that would endanger the ship and the passengers. The officers and the crew constantly told the captain that he can't do these things because they aren't safe. And the captain was doing them anyways. All right. Another aspect of this is that the political divide between the people on the boat was pretty drastic. There had just been a huge war all over Europe. And France is literally torn. There's the people that support the monarchy and the aristocrats, and there's the people that support like the revolutionaries and the people that are against the aristocrats. And most of the people on the boat are against the aristocrats. The captain is an aristocrat, and there's a few aristocrats on the ship. Everybody else is against the aristocrats. There's a lot of friction that way. Anyways, the captain makes the Medusa go faster, and he leaves the rest of the convoy behind. You don't do this. This is a very bad thing to do in a convoy. You have to keep all the ships together. And the whole time, the officers are saying, Captain, you can't do this. And he's telling them to basically shut up. Okay, so this was the planned route. This is the route that the captain went on. And the reason why people don't normally go this route is because there are some very dangerous waters right off the coast of Africa. And lo and behold, you see where that red dot is? That's where the shipwreck happens. He runs aground off the coast of Africa. In fact, it's so off the coast. I mean, it's close to Africa, but you cannot see Africa on the horizon. It's over the horizon. All right, so they try for 2 days to get the ship free, and they can't. So they're going to have to abandon the ship. And they have lifeboats, but there's only 6 lifeboats. There's not enough to take everybody. So they have these 6 lifeboats. They put the ship's crew on the lifeboats. That's the captain and his men. Everybody else, the soldiers and the people going to man this place, don't have lifeboats to get into. So they create a raft. The engineers build a huge raft. So they take the ship apart and use the wood to make a raft. This illustration is the illustration that was drawn by the survivors of this to during the court hearings. Now, it's 23 feet wide by 66 feet long. And so when you have 150 people on it, this is what it would have looked like. The problem was that there were so many people that when they stood on it, the life raft was underwater. They were up to their knees in water standing on this raft. And in the rough seas, because they're not close to the shore, in the rough seas, that's like untenable. All right, and there were very little provisions. So each person had a couple of pieces of hardtack. This is a type of bread that is impossible to eat like by itself. You have to boil this bread to make it soft enough that you can eat it. All right. I don't see any ovens or any ways to make a fire to boil water. And then you see that hamburger up there, and I've cut out a third of that hamburger. Each person had basically a third of a hamburger of meat to eat. All right. This photograph right here, they have reconstructed this raft in a naval museum, and this is what it looks like with 150 people on the raft. All right, and then there were 17 people that took a look at the raft and said, no, I'm not getting on that. Anyways, the captain and his crew get in the boats. It is a huge maritime rule that the captain goes down with the ship. So the captain is the last one to leave the ship. But the captain left the ship with 17 people still on board. So that was a huge rule that was broken by the captain. But, he doesn't care. Here is the plan. The plan is that they're going to get the 6 lifeboats, and they're going to connect them all with a rope. And then because they have oars, they're going to connect it to the raft, and they're going to row the raft to shore. But the raft is so heavy, the seas are so choppy that they're rowing and rowing and rowing and getting nowhere. So they decide to cut the rope, and they're just going to row on to safety and leave these 150 people behind to their death. All right, and the people on the raft watch as the rope is cut and the boats row over the horizon, and they never see them again. The captain is on a life raft, and he rows directly to San Luis. The others that are in the life rafts row to shore, and then they walk to San Luis. So, meanwhile, back on the raft, almost immediately, those on the raft start fighting. They're fighting over the provisions, and groups are starting to form. The soldiers are fighting against the naval officer and civilians. There's a total breakdown of any kind of discipline. During the first night, waves come crashing over the raft, and in the morning, 150 people are left on the raft. How many people started? There was 150 to start. Now there's 130. So 20 people got washed over the raft into the dark water during the night. All right, now let me talk about the soldiers. All right, these are the army that's supposed to garrison San Luis when they get there. These are not good people. These are people that are conscripted against their will. That means they were, when they were drafted into the army, all right? for the Napoleonic Wars. They have seen really bad things and they have done really bad things. A lot of these people are beggars. A lot of them are convicts. A lot of them are criminals. A lot of them are lowlifes. So they've done bad things as soldiers. They've seen bad things as soldiers. And they are the troublemakers of the 19th century dirt poor. They had marched under Napoleon and were used to they were used to things other men were not used to. The soldiers were used to living in hell. Now listen as I quote some of the research that I found. So, and I thought these are pretty cool, or that they fit. They knew what it was to regularly walk in lockstep through hurtling walls of shrieking heavy iron while their friends' brains dripped off their chins. By the end of his reign, hardly a unit of the French army hadn't been pushed by the emperor through meat-grinding gates of hell in one spasm of butchery and puking, inducing horror or another. So you know that this group of soldiers had extreme PTSD. The only man who had cared for them was Napoleon, and he was locked up in a tiny island thousands of miles away. They had to serve under a new generation that was opposed to their traditions and thought most of them were deplorable. In a nutshell, many people aboard the Medusa were badly damaged goods who felt that their time has passed. So on the second night, there was a storm, and huge waves plucked more from the raft. The soldiers believed they were just minutes away from death, so they opened up a cask of wine and drank it. And what happens to bad people when they start drinking? Yeah, they get bad things, and bad people get worse. All right. So the drunks start cutting the ropes that are holding the raft together. Right? They're making it worse for everybody. Let's see. They faced death. So they were, the reason why they were cutting the ropes is they wanted to face death on their own terms and also take other people with them. The officers tried to stop them at first with fists, then axes, sabers, and bayonets. So there was a frenzy of stabbing that began on that second night. So we have the naval guys that are trying to stop the soldiers and the soldiers that are trying to tear the raft apart. And who else is on the raft? Is the civilians. They're in between the officers and the soldiers. So, and there's no space to get out of the way of the fight. So the bystanders who are not part of the fight were obstacles between the fighting parties. What do you do with obstacles? You toss them overboard. So people are being tossed overboard and rescued by others and brought back on board. The only woman on the raft was one of these obstacles. Then the combatants would have a rest and then fight again, on and off again through the night. So bodies became entangled in the planks and the ropes. All right, so by the third day, they were down to 60. They went from 150. The second day, they were at 130. The third day, they were at 60. By the fourth day, they were down to 50. By the fifth day, they were down to 30. And by the seventh day, they were down to 15. And then another week of drifting and surviving. And I think on, let's see. It was the fourth day that they started to succumb to cannibalism. There's dead bodies lying all around. They start eating the dead bodies. On the 15th day, they were found purely by accident. Nobody was out looking for them. When the captain made it to San Luis, he never mentioned the raft. So nobody went out to go look for him. The ship that found them was going back to the Medusa to find extra supplies to get supplies off of the Medusa and take back to San Luis. That's when they ran into the raft. After they were rescued, so there were 15 people on the board of the raft when they were rescued. Even after they rescued, 5 more of them died because they were too far gone. They were too close to death. So a couple of months later is when they went back and got the supplies, and they found 3 people still on board. There were 17 people that stayed on board when they left. 13 of those made their own raft, went out, and they were never heard from again. And then one made his own raft out of a small crate, and he was never heard from again. So they found 13 people, or they found 3 people still on board. All right. So that's the story of the Medusa. Now, Jericho, the artist, heard this story, was, flabbergasted by it, wanted to do a painting of it, and he starts to do his research. So he starts interviewing the survivors. And here are some sketches of the survivors as he interviewed them. On the raft of Medusa, there was a lot of dead people. So he wanted to study dead people. So he gets body parts from the morgue. These are criminals that have been executed, and he gets their body parts and he has them in his studio and is studying them. He's doing small paintings of them to see how flesh decomposes and what dead bodies look like. And I read a book on this painting, and people that came by to visit his studio were overcome by the stench of rotting corpses in his studio. He paints this, or in order to paint this, he moves to a new studio on the outskirts of Paris, and he finds a studio large enough to paint on this large painting, 16 feet tall, 23 feet wide. And then also he shaved his head to do the painting so he wasn't distracted by things like hair. So this is our painting right here, the Raft of the Medusa. And to get a closer look of that, let's go ahead and write down this information. I'll give you a moment. Are we good? All right, so here is a painting of the raft. There's a group of people on the raft. The people that are down below, right? These are the people that have given up hope. We have the dead and the dying and people that have given up hope. Over here at the top are the people that still have hope. And they are waving to, there's a ship on the horizon right over here. All right, you can just barely see it. And they are waving to that ship, hoping to be rescued. So we don't know if it's a ship that passed them by or if it's their rescue. All right, and there are 2 corpses here that balance each other. They have these linear elements. So we have these lines of their limbs that are coming out, and that helps balance things. So this corpse has his legs caught in the wood, and his upper body is submerged in the water. The light is shining on this group right here, and it like there's a dark area over here, and so this light kind of goes in this kind of circular or semicircular motion, and it goes from the dead and dying down here and the hopeless on the way up to the hopeful right here. So it gives the picture drama and movement. And then we have these triangular or these pyramidal compositions. There's a pyramid of those on the left and a pyramid of those on the right. And if you remember the pyramidal compositions or the triangular compositions of the Renaissance, this is very much more complex than that. So, and I always think of the Renaissance as being quite orderly and nice and safe compositions. And as we get out of the Renaissance, things get a lot more complicated. There's an axe right here that they use to build the raft. And that's a reference to the bloodshed that was spilled on the first night. And then this guy right here, the torso on the left is missing his lower half, and he's been cannibalized, or his lower half is submerged below the raft. Either way, it's not good. And then we have this guy right here who is tearing his hair out in an anxious fit. And like I said, the 6 figures that are in the foreground, 3 are alive and 3 are dead. The dead figures are painted with this greenish hued skin. And the dude flopped over is just about to die. All right, now the main guy, the guy that's up there that's highest, and he's waving the fabric. All right, that is Joseph. He is a well-known model of Haitian descent. There he is. All right, he's known as Joseph. His name is Jean Charles. There are several black figures in the painting. They are all modeled by Joseph. And this is a reminder that this is a time of slavery and colonization. And at this time, black figures were very rare in art. This is one of the first. All right, so the figure waving the red and white scarf, he is challenging the expectation that the figure most representative of the hope in the story should be white. The most heroic he is the most heroic figure in the picture, and France had not yet outlawed slavery yet when this painting was made. And he is both a survivor and a savior. This is one of the first times in art history to show the black figure as a primary hero. And he is a symbol of hope and humanity, which is shocking for the viewers of this painting at the time. And if you look at the back of him, all right, so this painting right here is the Belvedere torso. It's a very famous Greek sculpture, and the back of the Belvedere torso is what Géricault used to model for this guy's back. This guy right here is hanging on to the other guy. So he's an old man. He's hanging on to the dead body of his son. And rigor mortis has set in with his son. And you can see that the son's arm is, the man's arm is bandaged. So it's possible that he fought to keep his son from being cannibalized. And the father is the only figure in the raft that looks towards the viewers. And he's racked with grief and hopelessness. So there was one art historian that was comparing this figure to that of Ugolino and his sons from Dante's Inferno. So I bet you're wondering wondering who is Ugolino. So I have a story within a story. So Ugolino, true story, was a 13th century figure. He was a politician, and he was charged with betraying the city of Pisa. He belonged to one political party, and he did some favors for another political party. And he also sold some fortresses from his own town to a neighboring town. That's what a traitor does. There were some riots in Pisa, and during those riots, he stabs and kills the nephew of the archbishop. So his punishment for stabbing and killing the nephew of the archbishop is that he and his sons and grandsons are locked in a tower and quite literally thrown away the key. So they are locked up there to essentially starve to death. and he has to watch as his sons and grandsons starve to death, and he eventually succumbs to his own hunger and eats his children and grandchildren. Dante, remember I taught you guys about the how hell is structured. Dante puts Ugolino way at the bottom, right next to Lucifer himself. And Dante has a conversation with Ugolino, and Ugolino and the Archbishop are frozen together in hell. And Ugolino is eating the Archbishop's brain forever through all eternity. All right, so that is the story that reminds art historians of that figure right there. All right, moving on to now. This painting looks a lot like a traditional painting. It looks a lot like Baroque. It looks a lot like neoclassicism. The size of the picture, right, is huge. What do we call that? That's a history painting. All right, history paintings are huge. All right, and it has a lot of the same trappings, the same compositions, and everything for a traditional neoclassical or Baroque painting, but it is decidedly Romanticism. So, what makes it Romanticism? What makes the Oath of the Horatii neoclassical, and what makes the Raft of Medusa Romanticism? The Oath of the Horatii, they are sacrificing themselves for the higher good, right? They are doing a good deed. They are fighting for Rome, and they are fighting so that others won't have to die. So they are serving the state. The other thing that makes the Oath a traditional painting is that look how clear it is. It's very clear to see what is going on, and the lighting is clear, the colors are clear, and it's very easy to understand. Now, the raft. So instead of teaching a moral lesson like a traditional painting, instead we have a scene of horror. In this story, people died for no good reason. They died for nepotism. These were senseless deaths. There are no heroes here. And also, there are dark figures in the background. All right, so this darkness in the background is not very traditional. All right, and the colors are not quite so bright and easy to understand. So these are some of the differences between a traditional and this new style of painting, Romanticism. Like I said, it has the size of a traditional history painting. This is the painting in the Salon, and you can see how absolutely huge it is when compared to many of the others in the Salon that year. It has a pyramidal composition, just like a traditional painting. All right, and it has these strong diagonals like a traditional painting, but it is the content that makes it untraditional. So this painting was highly critical of French politics at the time. Nepotism in politics had led to this tragedy. And it was criticized for, there's both criticism and praise for this painting. The people who hated the aristocracy loved this painting because it was critical of the aristocracy. The people who loved the aristocracy hated this painting because it was critical of the aristocracy. Do you see how your political beliefs and political alignments cause you to look at the same picture and see different things and have different opinions of it? So the ones that loved it described it as a masterpiece. Critics who supported the government condemned the painting, described it as just a pile of corpses. And the painting did not sell at the Salon. All right, and then Géricault never really gained the success that he craved during his life, and he died of poverty and despair at age 32, which is a very young age to die. And when this work was exhibited in Paris Salon of 1819, the public would have recognized the subject. It had been in the news just a few years before and quickly grew into a political scandal. By the way, the captain of that ship, he was court-martialed, but because he's friends with people that are in charge, he got no real consequence. All right, a slap on the wrist. All right, and that will end us for part 3 of chapter 27, and that will end us for the day. So let's get our tableau vivant. We've already done that. You need to turn in your tableau vivant. And then let's turn in our Grand Manner portraits. I opened up the assignment in Schoology so you can turn in your Grand Manner portraits. What else? And we've turned in the beast already. So from here on out, it's just note taking and tests. All right. Okay.